Oh, the car from Carvana's here. Well, will you look at that? It's exactly what I ordered. Like, precisely. It would be crazy if there were any catches. But there aren't, right?
Right. Because that's how car buying should be. With Carvana, you get the car you want. Choose delivery or pickup, and a week to love it or return it.
Buy your car today with
Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
All creatures great and small!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take the Open Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to another episode of Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Hacks and Ferments, and our subscribers. We're recording on Tuesday, November 4th. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Today, I'm joined by Aaron Campo and our engineer, Lickett. Well, the Sounders are back to even thanks to a 4-2 win over Minnesota United on Monday, setting up a decisive Game 3 on Saturday. The Sounders struck early and often, building a 3-0 lead through the kind of box crashing they couldn't muster in Game 1. They then gave up a couple goals in stoppage time, kind of put it in cruise control in the second half, though, picked up another goal. Either way, they're going to have to essentially repeat that to get a win. But, Aaron, I have to imagine you're feeling a lot better about their chances after that performance.
Yeah, I think that the thing we were hoping to see was them to sort of deliver on some of the promise they showed in the attacking phase in the last game. And they did that and then some. I mean, putting up 4 goals against the Minnesota team who has a extremely good defense is impressive. And I think the thing that it really showed is that this is a team where if you get one and you put them in a situation where they have to score, things can cascade from there. Like, they are so used to playing with an even or positive game state that they really, really struggle when they fall behind defensively. So, a really decisive performance. The 2 goals they gave up were certainly unfortunate and frustrating, but that's just kind of been the team this year. They have given up goals like that. It's not something you want to see, obviously, but I'll take a 4-2 win no matter how it comes.
Right. This has been, my theory on where those goals came from is the Sounders geared up so much to play against a sort of low block defense that they were a little unprepared for the dramatic change in game state when all of a sudden Minnesota felt like they had to press. And both goals, I don't know if they're, and that's the thing though, it's like the goals didn't necessarily come from them pressing as much as it just came from the Sounders being a little sloppy with the ball. That said, it did look like it was going to fall apart there in first half stoppage time, because after the second goal, Minnesota got another turnover that led to a decent look. Now, it didn't happen, but to the Sounders' credit, like they absolutely managed the second half. Minnesota did not take a single dangerous shot in the second half. The Sounders won 69% of the duels. They had something like 65% of possession. They the Sounders didn't shoot a ton, but they didn't give Minnesota very many opportunities to do much. They only gave up one corner. They only committed 4 fouls. Essentially, they clipped the loon's wings, if you will allow me this little turn of phrase. The Sounders, I thought this was a very professional performance. I'll note that Minnesota had only given up 4 goals once this year, and that was way back in June when they gave up 4 to San Diego. So this is pretty rare company for the Sounders to be in. And I don't know, I feel really good about a lot of stuff, but we may as well start with the biggest change the Sounders made, which was to alter their formation. Now, on paper, they were saying this was a diamond formation. I think you could talk yourself into it being a 4-2-3-1. The heat map or the heat map, basically the average, but the heat map. Maybe you could call it a 3-5-2. Either way, Jordan Morris and Danny Musovski started together, I believe, for the first time this year. What did you make of that change, and how likely or how much do you want to see it going forward?
So this was a topic of discussion today in our Discord, which of course you can gain access to by signing up as a subscriber at the supporter level or above. And you made a great point.
Well done.
I thought, thank you, which was that I think that this look makes a lot of sense against Minnesota. And I think that the reasons that it makes sense against Minnesota were very evident in this game. You've got just more options, more attacking options, more people to keep track of in the box. And the way you have to break Minnesota down is a lot different than the way you have to break other teams down. So I do want to see this lineup or close variation of this lineup. Hopefully Alex can go, but otherwise I would just run the same lineup out against Minnesota. If they get past Minnesota on Saturday and they have to play San Diego, I don't know that I'd want to see this lineup. I think that there's a reason that they had so much success this year playing a different system. But Minnesota's a team they struggled with, right? They lost. That's the only home loss of the year was to Minnesota. 0 goals in either game in Minnesota. It's a team they've just have had trouble figuring them out. And so I think that now you've got this proof of concept that this works. And I think you'd be crazy to change too much for the game on Saturday. But if they can get into the next round, I'm just not convinced it's the best way for them to line up.
I would echo basically all of that. And I was a little skeptical of this change at the start of the week when people were kind of suggesting it. But I have to admit, it worked about as well as it could. Morris is a much more dynamic player than Musovski, but Musovski is really good at finding that space. He scores a goal in this game where he essentially is, again, just putting himself in the right spot. And I think he is exceptionally good at that. And against Minnesota, you need someone like that who's just going to be sort of hanging out around the box, being dangerous, putting himself into advantageous positions. And it gives Morris a little bit more freedom to go find the ball to, he on the corner that they end up scoring the first goal in, it's Morris making a run into the box and winning that corner. Morris obviously scores the second goal where he, is essentially in the way of a Jesus Ferreira goal, but he gets a real touch on it. And, I think it's a deserved goal. He's in the right place at the right time. No reason to take that away. And then on the third goal, I believe he was involved in that one too, making, again, a decent run to help open up space. And I liked what Jordan Morris was doing in this game. He was involved in the first goal that they allowed, where I think the knee-jerk reaction was to sort of put that one on Morris. I'm not going to absolve him of blame. He deserves some blame on that one. But to me, that was more about him being aggressive and him trying to get out on the counter and being maybe a little careless with the ball. But it was an underhit pass from Obed Vargas, and then the Sounders had multiple opportunities to snuff out the counter before it got really dangerous, and they just didn't do a very good job of that. But yeah, I mean, overall, what did you make of Morris's performance? I'll add that he scored. That was his 10th goal. That ties him with Denny Bouanga for the most among active players. But other than that, he also, I should also add that he also now has the sole lead in Sounders franchise history for playoff goals. But what did you make of Jordan?
Yeah, I thought he was good. That probably won't shock people to hear that I thought Jordan Morris had a good game, but I do. I thought that I think it's pretty well established that I think Jordan is a striker and that's his best position. But I understand his role in this game on the wing, and really he's playing more of an inside forward position anyway. I think against Minnesota, the matchup and what it called for, I thought that it made sense. One of the major areas where Jordan is just, I think, a very clear upgrade on Musovski is defensively. And I thought Jordan had a really good game defensively. Mm-hmm. And they don't need that defense from the central forward spot as much against Minnesota. Like, it's just not, they're not going to be pressing as much. It's just not, the game state is not really going to call for it too much. So, so I think, getting him in a position where his defense can also be a contributing factor is a positive. And I do think that his movement on the right is very good. I think that he's typically better on the left, but I think for whatever reason, it's just worked having him on the right the last couple of games. He made things happen. Having that threat to counter, they don't get that opportunity often, but having somebody on the wing that can stretch play is certainly very nice. And yeah, I thought he was good. Again, I'm hoping, if the Sounders get through to the next round, that he's back central against San Diego or Portland. But I think for the matchup, it made sense. And, he got a goal. I believe he got an assist. And
he didn't get an assist, but
he didn't get an assist, but but I thought he played really well, very involved. The one mistake was certainly unfortunate, but I do think, like you said, that laying that entirely on his feet is a little bizarre considering how many failures there were on that play.
Yeah, and there were, we don't have to necessarily unpack all of that. I think Schmetzer was effectively correct in that he wasn't super worried about those goals because he just didn't think it was going to happen again. I agree, but also the Sounders have now, an inordinate number of their goals feel like they are coming directly off of turnovers, allowed, that is, the goals that they've been giving up. So I wouldn't say it's without concern, but I am willing to. No, I don't think this is not something I'm going to get worked up over, I guess is my point.
Right. I think the second goal as well, Gaymar has had a lot of success dribbling through traffic and starting counterattacks. And it's kind of like Reagan will occasionally mishit an aggressive pass and then it'll turn into a dangerous counterattack.
Right.
But he doesn't mishit 200 more, and it's a huge part of the way you attack, right? So it's just like you kind of have to, same with Jordan trying to make something happen on that counterattack. If he makes that pass successfully, it's a lot of trouble for Minnesota. If Gaymar is able to find the space to make another pass and get the ball into a dangerous area, the dribble makes sense. And it was just kind of bad timing, and then everyone behind them not really doing their job that really contributed to it.
Yeah, I think my bigger complaint about both those turnovers was more a sort of miscalculation of the game state. The Sounders are already up 3-0. It's first half stoppage time. You don't really need to be pressing the action at that point. Sure,
very true.
Getting a fourth goal would be nice. It would, really put the game away. But the risk reward there feels just a miscalculation. They don't need to be pushing for another goal at that point in the game. I mean, if they take that into halftime up 3-0, there's every reason to feel like the game is effectively over at that point. So I think that's the one thing that I would critique about both of those situations. But there was a lot positive, and I think that the way they reacted to the giving up those 2 goals in the second half was really one of those big positives. One of the players who I thought maybe had the biggest role to play in that was Christian Roldan, who gets 2 secondary assists in this game. He helped set up both of the first 2 goals. I think it was actually even his pass that sets up the corner on the first goal. But he was everywhere this game. He was every bit the best 11 quality player that he has been all year. And I think it really showed, between him and Obed Vargas, it really showed a significant advantage that the Sounders can potentially have, for as long as they're alive in the playoffs, is that they are just both capable of covering so much ground and being real two-way players in the way that I don't think any other 2 central midfielders in MLS are right now.
Yeah, I think that the midfield really is a cheat code. And, Obed especially has Christian, we almost take for granted, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
But Obed has really down the stretch just really started blossoming as a player. It's gone from at the beginning of the season, sort of like we put up with some of the stuff Obed does because we know how good he can be. And it's important for him to continue to develop, to now, like, it's almost impossible to imagine this team without him, in the midfield. And I thought he had an outstanding game, aside from the, his part in the first goal, the first Minnesota goal, I should say. Very, very close to a hat trick, right? Which is, I mean, he's never been much of a goal scorer. So for him to get a brace and hit the woodwork on a third, I think is really speaks to his development. And he just has a confidence about him now that he's sort of been growing into since the Club World Cup. I think that was kind of he was one of the players I think that really leveled up during that tournament.
Yes,
who it sort of like flipped the switch for him. And I think he's just been kind of growing into himself since then. And it would be great for him to have a monster playoffs, because you got to figure that there are some eyes on the playoffs. And if he is going to be leaving in the off season, it'd be really nice for him to go out on, a high note if he can continue putting in performances like this. But, even after Leyva came in, I thought he looked great in his limited time. The Sounders have just, they've had some great midfields over the years, but I think this one, when it's humming, is really something special. Probably the best they've ever had, I think.
Yeah, and you can even throw Albert Rusnak into the mix there as well when you're talking about the midfield. He did not have a huge game from a production standpoint, but he was just quietly very effective, I thought. Certainly someone who I've been very happy with in the way that he's played really during this. He hasn't had any moments that stood out, but he just has been solid. I felt like, at least throughout this. One of the other interesting developments in this game, though, was late in the second half, maybe around the 80th minute or so, when all the Sounders are getting ready they're warming up and they're getting ready to go in. There was a somewhat surprising addition to that group. Andy Thomas was kind of going through the warmups and was, looking like the Sounders maybe were actually preparing to bring him in if that game went to penalties. It ended up being moot. Of course, the Sounders end up using their final sub on Osaze de Rosario in the 90th minute, but at that point it was already 4-2.
Yeah.
And Brian was asked about this in the post-game press conference, and he was not excited to entertain the question. Basically said, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. We'll see what happens. And was really trying it's an interesting line that he's trying to walk. I have suspected that he didn't want to entirely close the door on this possibility. And look, I don't see what other reason there would be to be warming up Thomas unless you think there's at least a possibility you might bring him in. Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Sarietas, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible through our paid subscribers. Plans start as low as $30 a year and allow us to remain independent and mostly ad-free. Subscribers get access to all our written and podcast content, including a full-text RSS feed and a mostly ad-free podcast feed that includes every show in one spot. If you really like what we're doing, though, I'd encourage you to sign up at our higher tiers, which include all sorts of various perks. The most popular of those is our members-only Discord, where the real Sounders sickos hang out. I know I've called this group the smartest, funniest, and best-informed Sounders fans in the world, but it's more than the rough equivalent of a Sounders Mensa meeting. Discord is where we make things happen, like for real. You know the promotion the Sounders ran that offered fans the opportunity to trade in their Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock one? That originated in our community. You'll not only be the first to know about stuff, but you also have a semi-direct line to the movers and shakers at the Sounders organization. If you want to be one of the totally normal people who occupy the Sounder at Heart Discord, just become a supporter of Sounder at Heart. Anyway, thanks for listening, and go Durs. No Sarietas, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code Sounder at Heart, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code Sounder at Heart at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network.
Yeah, because there's no advantage to warming up the guy that you think is better in penalties and then not putting him in. Like that's not an effective kind of mind game to play. Maybe it's a situation where he said, I'm just going to warm him up and see what the vibes are. If it gets to that point, you know, maybe he hadn't fully made up his mind. I don't know, but it definitely, I feel like a lot of people took his comments about it after the last game to mean he would never entertain the thought. And
I did not take that way.
I did not.
I think that you're right. A lot of people did take it that way.
I did not read it that way at all. I think that I think the easiest thing in the world for him to come out and say is, I'm not going to do that, if he's not going to do it. And he definitely did not say that. So it was very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I'm glad it didn't come to that. I will
very
definitely
glad it
say
didn't
that.
come to it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very glad it didn't come to it. And I hope, I really hope it doesn't come to it again. I do not relish the possibility of this series being decided in penalties at all. I would much rather win it outright. And I think the performance in this game sort of flips the script a little bit. I actually wrote in my column this week about how there was seeming this almost mystique about Minnesota's defense and the sound and the Minnesota. I think part of it was Minnesota had sort of told themselves this narrative that it's okay that we keep giving up not just possession, but the better chances to the Sounders, because this is our game. This is how we play. We give up chances sometimes. And the whole thing is that we just don't allow goals. And I guess there's some logic in that. And I suppose it's worked, but this is not, I've been saying all along, this is not a winning game plan. It is not a winning game plan to give up 4 big chances and just pray that none of those go in. And that's really what this is. It's not that Dane St. Clair's been standing on his head and playing this spectacular goalkeeping against the Sounders. It's that the Sounders are putting themselves in good positions and then just not forcing good saves. That was what happened in game 1. And look, in game 2, I look at that Obed Vargas goal where he hits it through traffic, and St. Clair might not be entirely sighted on it, but he gets a hand on it and he doesn't stop it. Yeah. I mean, he is not, in fact, superhuman. And I think getting that goal sort of broke the mystique about sort of what was going on in this between these two teams. The Sounders obviously scored 4. And now I think the script flips a little bit because the Sounders have, a ton of experience in this kind of game, in these decisive win or go home type of games. The Sounders, even just during the Brian Schmetzer era, have played 17 of these games in the playoffs. And that's not even including other competitions. They're 12-5 in those games. In the entire history of Minnesota United, and granted, it only goes back to 2017, they're 2-5, and they're currently on a 4-game losing streak. In fact, the only time that they've actually won a playoff game outright was in the 2020 playoffs when they won the first 2 games before they played the Sounders. But last year when they advanced out of the first round, they won 2 shootouts. Obviously, the game they won earlier this year was a shootout. I think from a mental standpoint, it feels like the Sounders should have the advantage here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was a noticeable panic that set in Minnesota after the second goal, especially. St. Clair looked really unconfident, I thought, after the first goal was scored. They looked very rattled, and I think that every game is different, and they've got plenty of time to mentally regroup.
Yes,
but there has to be some doubt that wasn't there, I would think, going into this game. And the Sounders have it cuts both ways, right? I mean, the Sounders probably felt a little bit jinxed against Minnesota United, and now they just went out and scored 4 goals against them, so they're going to be more confident. I think that there's going to be a little bit less confidence in Minnesota, to the extent maybe that they feel like they need to change something up from a game plan perspective and don't feel like they can win in advance playing the style that they've played all year and feel like they need to mix things up. And that's the thing, right? Because there's a temptation to say, well, it was great to score 4 goals, but in a series where aggregate goals aren't a thing, it doesn't really matter. But I think it does in this one specifically, because I think Minnesota does have this mystique about them, and they have this way of carrying themselves where they just don't feel like they're going to concede. And the Sounders shredded them. I mean, that can't go unnoticed by their players.
Right. And I think in this weird way, I think it actually helps the Sounders' cause, because if this game had ended 3-0, let's just say, or 5-0, or even it got really out of hand, right? I think there would have been a temptation to say, look, once the Sounders went up 1-0, what is, that Minnesota has nothing left to play for, really. I mean, you could talk yourself into this.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter that they scored 3 goals. It doesn't matter that they scored 5 goals or whatever. But the fact that Minnesota made it competitive, and, so for essentially the bulk of the second half was played in a game state where Minnesota knew that they just needed 1 goal.
Yeah.
I think that sort of changed it. It just gives more credence to the Sounders' belief that they just they went toe to toe with Minnesota and they outplayed them. Like, don't give me this stuff about, well, the game was already on ice, it doesn't matter. Well, it wasn't, though, because it ended up being, a competitive game for the majority of it. So,
yeah. And the fact that the Sounders were able to shut it down to the extent that they did has to also be something that was noticed, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't know that Minnesota can really afford to play this same game style, because as we saw, is if they give up an early goal, that creates this is not a team who's built to be playing from behind. I think we saw that, they did get those 2 goals, but this is not, they didn't want to play that way. They really didn't come out of their shell until they were down 2-0. And even then it wasn't like they're not built to chase games, I don't think. And I suspect that they're probably going to come out a little bit more aggressive. But what's interesting is both those counterattacks were well played. Like, those were good counterattacks.
They were, yeah. This is a talented Minnesota team. They have some talented attacking players. They have some nice creative players. I don't begrudge a team doing anything they feel like they need to do to win games, especially in the playoffs, right? I don't, I know a lot of people hate watching Minnesota, and I totally get it. But coming into this game, I didn't have any problems with Minnesota at all. Now, over the course of this game, I developed some real problems with Minnesota.
Yeah.
I thought that they were nasty and classless. And I'm not a guy who tends to care about that kind of stuff, but this was just like a step beyond, I think. But but they don't have to play this way, I don't feel like. Like, I think that they could be, I think that they're going to be more well suited to playing defensively and relying on set pieces and throw-ins. Obviously, that's their bread and butter, but they don't have to be this cynical, I don't think.
No, they and I do want to talk about this a little bit. Especially in the early stages of this game, it felt like some of the cynicism was it was like kind of off the charts.
Yeah.
I want to say it was the first minute when Dane St. Clair is already sort of like going through this whole routine, taking forever on free kicks. There was 2 different incidents where there was a collision where I don't know. Especially the one with Roldan and Pereira, which was like the 3rd minute. And Pereira's sitting there holding his head, acting like everyone on the Minnesota bench is talking about wanting a red card. I'm sorry, but that's Roldan does absolutely nothing questionable on that play. And, we get like a 2-minute stoppage time there. There was another 2 or 3 minute stoppage time when Yamar went up for a header again. There was nothing in it. And it just felt like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like
ridiculous stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
It just feels like, I don't know. I don't know that does that give you confidence to?
It's loser energy. It's absolutely loser energy. You don't feel like you're going to win the game if you're resorting to that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And them taking the attacking throw in after the Sounders put the ball out is maybe as mad as I have ever been at a game in my life. I was so pissed off about that because it was just so just cheap and disgusting and just like, look, man, like this whole thing relies on us respecting a code to some degree. And really, really nasty stuff.
Yeah, I can't say I'm a big fan of the way Minnesota plays the game. I don't really begrudge them. Look, if they eliminate the Sounders, fair play. Not much you can say. They will have deserved it, but I am feeling pretty confident. I was pretty confident going into this series. I will admit my confidence was somewhat shaken after the first game. I felt like they would win this game, but because of the way they won it, it does give me a little bit more belief that they can see this out. I do like the idea of essentially going with the same lineup that they went with in this last game. We'll see about Alex Roldan after the game. Schmetzer made it sound like he thought Alex would be back, that it wasn't anything serious, and that he should be able to be available for Saturday. We're going to go to training tomorrow. We'll see how involved he is. But I thought Kalani Kosarienzi was totally fine in the second half.
Yeah.
You talk about a player who comes off the bench. Alex Roldan had been very good. I don't think he missed a beat.
No. And they obviously play the game differently and have different strengths. But Minnesota is just not a team I'm worried about a downgrade in defending, and I don't think it's a huge drop off in any case. But if the Sounders were playing against a team that actually attacked, it would be a little bit more of a concern. But he looked great. He looked up for it for sure, as he always does. And I think I would rather have Alex, but I think that you could maybe talk yourself into to thinking maybe we want Kosarienzi in a game where we need to be on the front foot and attacking and trying to get on the board early,
it definitely doesn't seem like a huge downgrade at the very least.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, so this game is going to be on Saturday. It's a 1 p.m. start. I think, no promises yet, but I will say I think we are going to do a watch party at Fast Fashion on Saturday. I'm talking to the Lobbing Scorchers guys about possibly even having a live post-game show, so that might be kind of fun. But I want to invite everyone. I will have more details, but put a little mark in your calendar if you want to hang out with us. But anything else that jumped out at you from this game? Anything else that I don't know if there was anything else that we really needed to talk about.
No, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from me was that the Sounders looked like a team who felt extremely confident they were going to win this game.
Yes.
And they were extremely decisive early. And obviously going to Minnesota, it's a different situation. But I think they need to bring that energy to this game.
Yeah.
Because I think, like you said, Minnesota is not a team that can play from underneath. And if the Sounders created a lot of decent chances in the first 10 minutes in the first leg. If they can capitalize on one of those, I think you've got to feel really, really good about their ability to hang on. So, so hopefully they can have that same kind of confidence in Minnesota. They don't feel too jinxed by Allianz Field, and we can be talking about San Diego or Portland in a week's time.
Yeah, not to get ahead of ourselves, but what do you make of that other series, that San Diego Portland series?
I mean, I think that San Diego is likely going to advance. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. I think they're a better team, but they're not a very good home team. They're not as good as I think their points total would indicate. And I hate to give them credit, but Portland, I mean, they have their issues, but they're up for a fight. They're a team that plays with a chip on their shoulder, and I would certainly not count them out. And I mean, I'd probably rather play the Timbers, I guess, all things considered. If the Sounders can get through to the next round, they're not as. I mean, San Diego's a better team. The Sounders would have home field advantage, which would be pretty nice. I hate playing the Timbers in the playoffs more than anything, but I think that's. I won't say I'll be rooting for the Timbers, but I would not be upset to see them advance, and I think they have at least a puncher's chance.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about, you sat in the stands for this game. Early on, it looked like the crowd was going to be pretty thin, but as it went on, I actually thought it filled in pretty nicely, and to the point where at the end of the game, it didn't feel, at least by the current standards, it didn't feel egregiously thin. What did you make of the crowd, though?
I mean, it was definitely an engaged crowd. It was a very good crowd, I thought, in that sense. I wasn't in our normal seats, so I wasn't able to see how the crowd was compared to a normal game. But I mean, it from where I was sitting, the rest of the stadium looked pretty good. Pretty full for a Monday night, especially. I had plans to go get dinner before the game because I assumed attendance was going to be really poor. So I thought, it won't be any problem. And the restaurant was packed. So I just ended up going to the stadium early. And the crowd definitely really filled in. And I was pleasantly surprised. So hopefully we've got another game to do even better. That would certainly be nice. But I mean, I think that playoff crowds, especially in the first round, are always a little on the smaller side. But this one didn't seem appreciably smaller than a regular season game to me.
Yeah, that was sort of my observation from. It's always funny to me how different my observation of the crowd is from the press box versus people in the stands. And I understand where you're sitting is going to heavily influence how full or empty it might seem. Like if you're in a section where there's lots of empty seats, it's going to just give you the sense that it's a lot more empty. Whereas where I am, I'm like kind of looking at swaths. And if I'm not seeing a lot of empty seats in large parts of the area, it doesn't, whatever. Anyway, I just thought it was an interesting little tidbit to throw in there.
Yeah, I definitely think, based on the amount of tickets that were available yesterday, I assumed that it was going to be a pretty bad turnout. But I think a lot of other people did what we did, which was just wait, until the day of to see how cheap the tickets got. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they had a ton of day of ticket sales. Yeah,
that would be,
which maybe should teach them something. Probably not.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that this comes at a time when, there's a lot of moving and shaking going on in the organization about where this is all heading. And, it's a good reminder, I think, that there are some real benefits to being in downtown. And one of them is, I think you tend to draw this type of crowd that is, that's one of the things I always love about the playoffs is that even though the crowds aren't the biggest, they tend to be the most engaged and into it. And it feels like it can get going pretty easily. But all right, well, let's I guess we'll call it there. Thank you, of course, to our sponsors, Full Pool Wines, Hacks and Ferments, as well as you, our subscribers. I'll give you another pitch. If you want to get the best and most engaged parts of the Sounder at Heart community, get on our Discord. There's always conversations going on there. I oftentimes feel like I'm able to sort of dry run a lot of the stuff we're going to talk on this show during it, just in the conversations in Discord. So it's always a lot of fun. But other than that, we will be back obviously later in the week, as well as we'll see how long we're doing this whole thing this year. So thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Lickett. I am Jeremiah Oshan, signing off for Nos Audietis, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Remember, you'll never get alone.
Let's go, Sounders.